Today we're looking at the will of God as Paul describes it in Ephesians chapter 1. I encourage you to go back and read the entirety of chapter 1, if either before or after you watch the video. Let's jump right in Ephesians 1 verses 7 through 8, and this is from the ESV. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, according to the riches of his grace, which he lavished upon us in all wisdom and insight. So in him we have, we're told, the redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses. The question is that one thing or two things? Let's take a look at it. In Greek, in ho ekomen, in him or in whom we have, tein apolutrosin, the redemption, dia tu haimatos autou, through his blood, tein aphesin, ton paraptomaton, forgiveness of our transgressions, our knowing, intentional crossing of the line type sins. So, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of transgressions. Apolutrosin is the price that you pay to redeem someone out of slavery, to purchase someone out of their indenture. So if I've wronged someone, or I've run up a debt, or I'm on the verge of economic collapse, I can find myself indentured to someone as a servant, and apolutrosin is the act of buying someone out of that servanthood. So a third party comes along and pays off my debt so that I don't have to fulfill the indenture. That's the redemption through his blood. How did he pay off the debt? With his blood. Then we're told the forgiveness of transgressions, the release of that debt, of that the consequence for those actions, and I can't say that word at all today. Paraptomaton, the knowing stepping across a line. Trespass is a great word for it because it means I know where the boundary was, but I crossed it anyway. So those are the two things. Are they one thing? Are they parts of a whole, or are they two separate things? Grammatically, they are one thing. Why do I say that? Because they are both the direct object of the verb ekomen. What do we have? Ekomen is we have, right? What do we have on his account because of him? We have redemption through his blood, forgiveness of our trespasses. Notice, I'm going to pop it back up so you can see it. Notice that there's no conjunction. We would expect a kai. We might even tolerate a de, but we would expect a kai here if these were two things. The redemption through his blood and forgiveness of our transgressions. But we don't have a kai here. We don't have a conjunction. What we do have is accusative in simple apposition. So what do I mean by that? So the first object of the verb is the redemption in the accusative. The second object of the verb is the forgiveness, aphesin. So here we have the two things, the redemption and the forgiveness are both in the accusative case. In the simple apposition, one is further explaining or magnifying the other. If I said to you, my son has a municipal job, the city dog catcher. I'm not telling you that he has two different things about him. I'm not saying he has a municipal job and also as a hobby he likes to catch dogs. I'm elucidating what that municipal job is. My son has a municipal job, the city dog catcher. If I put an and in there, my son has a municipal job and he catches dogs for the city, they could be two totally different things, right? One could be a side gig, the other could be his main gig. But in the absence of the conjunction, with them both being in the accusative case, we would assume it to be the same thing, simple apposition, and an elucidation and expansion on the other. How did he go about redeeming us through his blood? By purchasing the forgiveness of our transgressions. It's one thing in the same. What I should say is, if we had the conjunction kai here, it could still be apposition. It wouldn't be simple apposition, but it would be apposition. But if you add the kai, it opens up the possibility that the redemption through his blood and the forgiveness of our transgressions are not the same thing. So Paul, as a very smart man and a very smart writer, doesn't put the kai in there so we can clearly see simple apposition. The redemption through his blood and the forgiveness of our transgressions are the same thing. It's what makes us free. The transgressions that caused our indenture have been forgiven through his blood. He paid the price for what we owed, and that results in our redemption, and we're now we don't owe anymore for those transgressions. Let's carry on to the next part. Kata tu plutos te karatos autu. So according to the richness of his grace, and we get this great little phrase, heis epirissusen, which he has caused to overflow, eis hemas, into us, over us, upon us. It's more into us with that eis, right? And passa sophia kai phronese, according to the richness of his grace, which he caused to overflow into us in all wisdom and understanding. I love that little part at the end, in all wisdom and understanding. Why does it matter? Because he says he knew exactly what he was doing. When he chose to redeem us with his own blood, through his own blood, and which results in a part of which is the forgiveness of our transgressions, he knew what he was doing. He didn't get sold a bill of goods by purchasing you out of redemption or purchasing me out of redemption. He knew fully what he was doing. Spectacular, isn't it? Let's go on to verses 9 through 10a, the first half of verse 10. Making known to us the mystery of his will, according to his purpose, which he set forth in Christ as a plan for the fullness of time. 3 different chunks. Let's take them one at a time. To mysterion tu thelematos autu, the mystery of his will. If you look at every time Paul uses the word mystery, you'll see something interesting. Mysteries in Paul's mind can only be apprehended, we can only get our arms around mysteries via a revelation from God. So Christ is the revelation from God of this mystery of God's will. When we see what Christ does, getting us redeemed through his blood, getting us the forgiveness of our transgressions, through his mission on earth, we see this mystery of God's will. It didn't seem like it made sense to us until we saw it play out. Then we get the second part, and proetheto and autu, which he purposed in him, in whom? In Christ. So the mystery of God's will is purposed in Christ. So we know the purpose of this revelation is to make known this mystery. And then we see the last part, eis oikonomion, tu pleromatos ton chiron, through administration or operation of the fullness of times. So we're going to see this thing, we're going to comprehend it as the fullness of times go through their full operation, as they work their way through the plan, as the gospel unfolds in its fullness in the life, death, resurrection, etc. of Christ. We'll get our arms wrapped around, we'll apprehend the mystery of God's will. Oikonomion is a great word. Administration, operation, management. An oikonomos is a manager, an administrator, usually a servant who runs a major household. He is the oikos, house, nomos, law. He's the management, he is the embodiment of the administrative function of running the household. So here we're told this in the oikonomion of the fullness of time. So as the administration of the time, as time runs its due course properly, and we witness the unfolding of the fullness of the times, and the gospel in Christ unfolds, and we see redemption, forgiveness through his blood, we will come to understand this mystery of God's will. And then we get the big whammy that comes in verse 10b. To unite all things in him, things in heaven and things on earth. Let's look at it in Greek. Anakephaliosasthai tapanta ento Christo. To sum up together under one head all things in Christ. Wait a minute, Ken, you didn't read a word there. You're right. I supplied a bonus word in here because ana means up or again. And so if we look at the context, that we're going to see a little bit more on Wednesday, if we look at the context and we talk about the significance of the passage, we can sort of read into this very rare, very unusual word, anakephaliosasthai, that this is summing up together again under the head of Christ. What are we summing up together? All things. What kind of all things? Ta epi tois uranos, the things in heaven, kai ta epi tes geis enautu, and the things on earth in him. What is God's will? God's will is that through the full administration of the gospel, through redemption through his blood, through forgiveness of transgressions, through the working out of the gospel in people's lives over the fullness of time, ultimately all things in heaven and on earth will be summed up together again under one head. That head is Christ in fullness. That is ultimately what Paul says to the Ephesians is the will of God. The will of God in this aorist middle infinitive is to recapitulate, to again put under a single head everything in creation in heaven and on earth. So think about it this way. The Bible starts with Eden. God and his creation living at peace in a face-to-face covenant relationship that unfolds in a garden. We get to the end of the Bible, we get Revelation with a new heaven and a new earth. And what do we see there? God and his creation living at peace, face-to-face in a covenant relationship in a garden. The beginning and the end are the same. The process in the middle, the unfolding of the fullness of time, the administration of the fullness of times of God's will is in him, in Christ, through this redemption via his blood, the forgiveness of transgressions, to restore, to regather under a single head all things in heaven and on earth, all of creation, restored, embodied in this one being, under this one head, Christ, in a peaceful covenant face-to-face relationship. How do we get back to the garden? Through the will of God operating in Christ on earth. The erasure of the sin mistake, the repair of what sin is broken, and covenant is restored. Again, oneness, unity in one head through the one being who is the embodiment of the will of God. So that's pretty spectacular, isn't it? Go back and read all of chapter 1 of Ephesians, and you'll see this thing unfold beautifully and powerfully. What isn't God's will? One might argue that God's will isn't anything that interferes or that runs contrary with the plan of unifying all things in heaven and on earth under one head, even Christ. Great stuff. Hope that was good for you. If it was, you know all the good stuff to do with social media, YouTube-y stuff, and all that kind of thing. And until next time, Karis Kai Orenik Yumin, grace and peace to you.